So I'm going to attempt to lightly touch on Martin Heidegger, or as the Germans say it, I don't fucking know. I don't understand the German R. When I do it exactly like them, they tell me I'm doing it wrong. And when I do some crazy other shit, they're like, yeah, you got that. I'm like, I know you're fucking with me. Stop. Anyway, I don't appreciate the German sense of humor, apparently. I'm going to start off with kind of the normal thing with the Wikipedia article, but Heidegger is famously impenetrable, so I am going to actually fall back on something that I wrote previously regarding this. But basically, my contention is that he was the first person to lay down a philosophy of mind that was actually Turing complete. Uh, and he did it before Church and Turing. By, not by much, but by a few years. Alright, so Martin Heidegger, I'm just going to say it that way because I don't care. He's dead and he was a Nazi, so nobody should care. Martin Heidegger was a key German philosopher of the 20th century. He's best known for contributions to phenomenology, hermeneutics, and existentialism. Yay! In Heidegger's fundamental text, Being and Time, 1927, Dasein, something like that. So this is the thing that I think is the first instance of a Turing-complete philosophy of mind, Dasein, is introduced as a term for a type of being that possesses the type of being that humans possess. Yeah, okay. So being as in like existence, not as in like there's a human being over there. Yeah, I don't know, that broke my brain. Dasein has been translated as being there. Heidegger believes that Dasein, well, he's dead, he doesn't believe in anything, that Dasein already has a pre-ontological and non-abstract understanding that shapes how it lives. See, you get into it and it's just like, fucking what? This mode of being he terms being in the world. Commentators have noted that Dasein and being in the world are unitary concepts in contrast to the subject-object view of rationalist philosophy, since at least René Descartes. Descartes. Heidegger uses an analysis of Dasein to approach the question of the meaning of being, which Heidegger scholar Michael Wheeler describes. And if you actually look at this, most of the shit in here is coming from Michael Wheeler. Describes as concerned with what makes beings intelligible as beings. And this next sentence is going to kind of explain why most of this shit is coming from Michael Wheeler. Heidegger was a member and supporter of the Nazi Party. There is controversy as to the relationship between his philosophy and his Nazism. It's pretty much, most people don't want to touch his shit with a 10-foot pole, 100-foot pole, 10 AU pole, whatever. He's kind of ignored. But yeah, so here, where did my window go? Is it this one? It's this one. Okay. So So this is something I made years and years ago, just outlining the requirements for Turing completeness, trying to get somebody else to understand what I was talking about. And I have 4 of them listed. One is addressable read-write memory. So this is something where you can manipulate stuff and you can safely like walk away from whatever change you made, and it's going to stay that way until you come back and make another change. That's really all that's happening. 2, an ability to compare values at 2 different addresses, right? So, using a literal house address, we could say, well, the house at 1217, it's a lot nicer than the house at 1223. That works as an analogy to this. Totally fine. 3, conditional branching. So this allows us to make decisions, right? So if one of the houses is nicer, which one would we want to live in? probably the nicer one. That's a conditional branch. And looping, right? So your kids, when they grow up, you're probably going to want to find a nice house for them, so you're going to have to repeat this process. That sort of thing. That's as simple as it is. And if you have those things, then if you set up a programming language or something, then it will be Turing complete. It will be a Turing complete instruction set. So Heidegger's Dasein, fucking hell. So he's got different parts to it that they're all German names, so I can't pronounce them. The long named one, Befindlichkeit, something like that. So basically what this is some things matter and some things don't. So this requires addressable memory and an ability to compare things at the addresses. So the first two things. Also, if things matter, then that must drive conditional branching, otherwise they wouldn't matter. So really, we got 3 of our 4 things just from this one piece. Wir stehen, something like that. There are intentions or orientations toward the future. So there is a script which is taken for granted to be able to refer back to itself. But it is in its current position because of things that are anticipated. So you can see that this is going to be looping. Looping is going to come around here. The script may be interrupted, which makes Dasein more powerful than a Turing machine. So this relates to this interruption, this interruptibility is, it kind of doesn't make it more powerful than a Turing machine, but it also kind of does, because now you're not subject to the halting problem in the same way that a simple Turing machine is. So the Star Trek thing where they're like, oh, here's a logical paradox, and the computer's just like, oh, fuck, and it doesn't affect people the same way. That's the thing. That's what I'm talking about. It's more powerful in that sense because it's interruptible. The nature of this aspect leads me to conclude that Dasein would use a language that would be classifiable today as a constraint language, while the lambda calculus is a functional language and Turing's languages were imperative. Okay, so it's kind of like you from Heidegger you get one type of way of looking at it. From Church you get a different type of way of looking at it, and from Alan Turing you get yet another way of looking at it. And these 3 different ways of looking at it are all pretty much equally valid. They all produce basically the same thing, but they are clearly very, very different from each other. And I think that's interesting. Like, it goes against the previously noted comment by Isaac Asimov that there's one science and there's only one way, everybody does it the same way. No. And then Reda. I don't know how to say this. You can do things. So addressable memory is writable, not just readable. And writing to memory is conditionally related to what matters now and the orientation to the future. So, yeah, kind of all of the components have to be there. All of the components of a Turing complete instruction set have to be there for Dasein to make sense. So, Dasein is functionally complete. It's a Turing complete instruction set. I feel like this is pretty much inescapable, but it's really hard to understand what he's saying because, like, he's making up terms and trying to explain it in ways that, there wasn't ways of explaining it before because nobody done this before because he's the first, because it's 1927 and Church and Turing were in a completely different part of the world and like a decade later when they were setting theirs up. And also they were working together, like Church and Turing were, I think Turing was Church's student or something like that. So there was some collaboration between them, and they still ended up looking at it in completely different ways. And they were doing it for a different reason. As I understand it, Church and Turing were interested in dealing with questions like the halting problem and um, the what was it? What turned into being fucking hell. Anyway, incompleteness. Yeah, the incompleteness theorem. What turned into that? They were interested in looking at those kinds of questions, but that is completely different from what Heidegger is looking at. He's looking at something very, very different, but they end up landing on things that end up acting the same way, basically. And I think that's. I've never seen anybody comment on this at all. So I think it's really interesting. And of course, as always, I might just have fucked up my understanding and, my interpretation of things. But yeah, no, I think that was whatever. Right or wrong, I think it's interesting for somebody else to look at that and be like, there might be something to this, or no, he's an idiot.